Hi everyone, my name is Prinzay Anderial and I'm your presenter for today. Like most of you, I spend a lot of time looking at screens, advertisements, and brands. Today, I'm excited to talk about a movement that took those everyday things and turned them into masterpieces. Pop art. So, what exactly is pop art? Pop art is a type of art that is meant to be fun. It isn't about deep or hidden meanings, it is about the world we see every day. Pop artists take commercial items and ordinary objects and turn them into art. Think of things like soda bottles, soup cans, or cereal boxes. This movement was made for the masses. That simply means it was made for regular people to enjoy, not just critics and fancy galleries. Pop art, which is short for popular art, first appeared in the 1950s and became a global phenomenon in the 1960s. So now let's talk about brief historical backgrounds of pop art. Pop art didn't just start in one place. It was a tale of two countries. It first emerged in the United Kingdoms during the mid 1950s, and in Britain, it started out as a bit more intellectual. Artists there were actually critiquing and analyzing American consumerism and mass media. By the late 1950s and 60s, the movement gained massive momentum in the United States. The American version was bold and vibrant, heavily shaped by Hollywood imagery, advertising, and popular culture. What started as a response to the modern world ended up becoming one of the most significant art movement of the 20th century. So why did pop art become so popular during this time? Several factors contributed to its rise, but the biggest one was the rise of mass media. So for the first time in history, television became common in almost every household, changing how people saw the world. Magazines, comics, and advertisements were everywhere you look. Because of this image were so because this image were so constant and relatable, artists began using them as their main inspiration. So the second major factor was the growth of consumer culture. After World War II, there was an economic boom, and people began buying more products than ever before. Shopping wasn't just a chore anymore, it became a lifestyle. As a result, brand and packaging became a constant part of everyone's everyday life. Pop artists recognized this shift and began using these famous logos and packages as the subject of their art, making the gallery feel just as familiar as a supermarket aisle. So finally, pop art was a reaction against abstract expressionism. Before pop art, high art was very serious, moody, and emotional. Pop artists wanted to move away from that. They wanted to create art that was simple, bold, and relatable to the average person on the street. So now I'm going to discuss socio-political issues in pop art. To understand the deeper side of pop art, we have to look at three main areas. First, consumerism. Artists began to question if society was becoming too focused on just buying products. They use art to ask, are we defined by what we own? So second, celebrity culture. During this time, fame and media exposure became massive influencers. Artists like Andy Warhol showed how celebrities were being treated almost like product themselves, mass-produced and sold to the public. Finally, US American identity. Pop art explored what it actually meant to live in a modern media-driven America. It captured the energy, the wealth, and the obsession with the new that defined the era. In short, pop art wasn't just drawing pictures of soup cans, it was examining the very fabric of modern life. So now let me introduce influential artists of pop art and their works. So first, we have the superstar of the movement, Andy Warhol. Warhol is the person who truly bridged the gap between fine art and commercial business. He became world famous for his legendary Campbell soup cans, where he took a basic grocery item and turned it into high art. He also created the iconic gold Marilyn Monroe, showing how celebrities were treated like products in media world and media-driven world. For Warhol, art was about repetition and the everyday things everyone could recognize. Another massive figure in pop art was Kate Haring. He created one of the most recognizable visual language of the 20th century. Haring wanted his art to be as accessible as possible, so he even opened a retail store called the Pop Shop. There, he sold posters and t-shirts with his signature bold dancing figures. He proved that pop art didn't just belong on a canvas, it belonged on the streets and in the hands of regular people. So now that we've seen some artists, let's look at the prevalent art forms and media they used to create these iconic works. So pop artists didn't just stick to traditional oil paints. To make their work look modern and commercial, they used a huge variety of materials and techniques. So first, painting and collage, mixing different images together. Second, printmaking, especially silk screening, which allowed them to mass-produce art like a factory. And third, sculpture and photography, turning 3D everyday objects into art. They also favored industrial material like acrylic paint and commercial printing methods to give their work that sharp machine-made look. So pop art characteristic. So how do you spot pop art? It usually shares these key characteristics. So first, bright and vibrant colors that grab your attention. Second, bold outlines and simple, recognizable imagery. Third, repetitions, like seeing the same face or product over and over. And fourth, irony and humor. It often pokes fun at society or serious art. And last, a focus on consumer goods, putting everyday items center stage. So to wrap things up, pop art completely changed the art world. It did this in three major ways. So first, blurring the line between high art and popular culture. Second, making art more accessible so that anyone could understand and enjoy it. And third, reflecting modern society by showing us what we buy, who we admire, and how we live. So even though the movement reached its peak decades ago, it still influences us today. You can see the DNA of pop art everywhere in graphic design, advertising, fashion, digital art, and it taught us that art is all around us, in every bright advertisement and every everyday object. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your time today.